The black Audi that was parked in my driveway when I got home, that wasn't mine. That was the moment everything I thought I knew about my life started to crack. I'm 51 years old. I spent 22 of those years building a career as a structural engineer in Nashville, Tennessee. Not glamorous work, not the kind of thing that gets you invited to speak at conferences or gets your name in trade magazines, but it was honest work, and I was good at it. Bridges, overpasses, commercial foundations. I understood how things were supposed to hold together under pressure. The irony of that isn't lost on me now. My wife and I had been married for 17 years. We met at a friend's barbecue in Brentwood the summer. I turned 34. She was laughing at something her friend said, and I remember thinking that was the kind of laugh that filled a room, whether you wanted it to or not. We dated for 2 years, got married in a small ceremony at her parents' lake house outside Cookeville, and moved into a 4-bedroom in Bellevue that we spent the better part of a decade turning into something that actually felt like home. We had 2 kids. Our son was 15. Our daughter was 13. Good kids. The kind of kids who do their homework without being asked twice and actually look you in the eye when you're talking to them. I coached my son's baseball team for 6 years straight. I knew every kid on that roster by name, knew their batting stances, knew which ones needed encouragement and which ones needed to be challenged. My wife used to joke about it. She'd say I was more focused on those boys than I ever was on anything else. I didn't think much of that joke at the time. The Audi in the driveway was gone by the time I came back downstairs that evening. My wife said it was a coworker stopping by to drop off some files she'd forgotten at the office. She worked in marketing for a real estate development firm in downtown Nashville. Long hours, client dinners, the occasional conference in Atlanta or Charlotte. I never questioned any of it. That was the kind of husband I was. I trusted her the way you trust the ground under your feet, without ever thinking about it. It was a Tuesday in March when I heard it. I came home early because a meeting had been canceled. I pulled into the garage and noticed her car was there, but the house was quiet. I figured she was on a call. I didn't announce myself. I went into the kitchen to get some water, and that's when I heard her voice coming from the back porch, muffled through the glass. I wasn't trying to listen. I want to be clear about that. I was standing at the sink filling a glass, and her voice just drifted in. She was on the phone, and I heard her say, clear as anything, he's dependable, sure. But dependable is just another word for boring, Renee. He goes to work, comes home, coaches Little League, goes to sleep. He's not someone you build a life with. He's someone you babysit the kids with. I stood there at the sink for a long time. I didn't move. The water was running over the rim of the glass and onto my hand, and I didn't notice until it went cold. Dependable. Boring. Babysit the kids. I set the glass down. I turned off the tap. I walked back to the garage, got in my truck, and sat in the driveway for 40 minutes without turning the engine on. Here's what I didn't do. I didn't go back inside and confront her. I didn't call my brother. I didn't drive to a bar. I sat in my truck and I thought about every moment from the last 6 months that I had explained away. The Audi, the late nights, the way she'd started wearing perfume on Tuesday evenings when she used to only wear it on weekends. The way she'd started keeping her phone face down on the kitchen counter. I'm an engineer. I solve problems by understanding the full structure before I start pulling things apart, because if you don't know what you're dealing with, you make the collapse worse. I drove back to work. My firm had a small conference room I sometimes used after hours when I needed quiet. I sat in there until 8 o'clock that night, and I made a list. Not of grievances, not of suspicions. A list of what I needed to know and what I needed to do once I knew it. The first call I made the next morning was to a family law attorney in Franklin. His name had come up in a conversation 2 years earlier, when a colleague of mine went through a difficult divorce. He had a reputation for being thorough and for not letting his clients get caught off guard. He gave me an hour on a Thursday afternoon. I told him what I knew, what I suspected, and what I was planning to do. He told me exactly where I stood and what documentation I would need. I left that office with a yellow legal pad full of notes and a very clear picture of what the next few months were going to look like. The second call was to a private investigator. I found her through the attorney's referral. She was a former insurance fraud investigator out of Memphis, professional, efficient, and exactly the kind of person you want when you need facts and not drama. She asked me 3 questions, told me her rate, and got to work. I didn't change anything at home. That was the hardest part. I still came home at the same time. I still cooked dinner on Wednesdays because that was our arrangement, and I had no reason to break it. I still watched television with my son on Sunday nights. I still helped my daughter rehearse for her school presentation on the water cycle. I acted like a man who didn't know anything, because the moment I didn't, the situation would stop being on my terms. It took 11 days. The investigator sent me a folder. Inside it was everything I needed. His name was in there. He was 29 years old, worked in digital marketing, had been with her firm as a contractor for about 8 months. There were photographs, dates, locations, a hotel off Charlotte Avenue that I'd driven past 100 times without ever thinking anything of it. I spent one evening with that folder, just one. Then I called my attorney back. Over the next 6 weeks, I did 3 things. I quietly opened a personal checking account at a different bank. I transferred a portion of my direct deposit each month. Nothing drastic, nothing that would raise flags, and began building a separate financial foundation. My attorney had advised me to be methodical rather than aggressive. I was. I contacted a financial advisor I'd known for years, a man I trusted, and restructured the way my retirement accounts were titled and benefited. Not dishonestly. Everything I did was exactly within legal bounds, but I wanted to make sure that when the conversation finally happened, I wasn't walking into it blind. And I met with a licensed therapist who specialized in family transitions and custody matters. Not for my own sake, though it helped. I brought my son and my daughter to see her separately, at different times, framed as just talking to someone new, someone neutral. She was kind and perceptive. After the second session, she pulled me aside and told me that both kids were clearly very grounded, that they had a strong relationship with me, and that in her professional observation, they would be resilient through whatever came next. That was the moment I exhaled for the first time in 6 weeks. My wife didn't notice any of it. That's the thing I keep coming back to. She didn't notice because she wasn't looking at me. She was looking somewhere else entirely. There was a Saturday in April when we were supposed to drive out to Murfreesboro for her college friend's birthday party. She went alone. She said I'd been quiet all week, and she didn't want my mood to bring things down. I said that was fine. After she left, my son came into the kitchen where I was standing with my coffee and said, without me asking anything, "Dad, you doing okay? You seem like you've been carrying something heavy." He was 15 years old. I told him I was fine, just tired from work. He nodded, like he didn't entirely believe me, but respected that I'd answered. Then he said, "You're a good dad. I just want you to know that." I managed to get to the garage before I actually had to deal with what that did to me. The conversation with my wife happened on a Wednesday evening in early May. The kids were at my sister's place for dinner. That part was intentional. My sister knew what was happening. She was the only person who did. I had already seen the attorney that morning. Everything was in order. The documentation, the timeline, the plan. I was sitting at the kitchen table when she got home. She came through the door and said something about traffic being bad, and asked if I'd eaten, and I said no, not yet, that we needed to talk. She stopped. She knew. I could see it in the 2 seconds before she composed herself. She set her bag down on the counter and sat across from me and said, "Okay." I didn't yell. I didn't produce the folder. I didn't say his name. I didn't say a word about the Audi in the driveway on that November evening, or the perfume on Tuesdays, or the phone face down on the counter. I simply told her that I knew what had been happening, that I had known for some time, that I had taken care of the things that needed to be taken care of, and that I thought it was best for everyone if we proceeded with a separation as calmly and respectfully as we possibly could for the sake of our children. She started crying. She said she was sorry. She said it had been a mistake, that it had already ended, that she still loved me. I believed the part about it having ended. I didn't know if I believed the rest. I told her I appreciated her saying that. I told her that what she said about me on the phone back in March, the dependable one, the babysitter, I hadn't forgotten it. I hadn't forgotten it. I wasn't bringing it up to punish her. I was bringing it up because I needed her to understand that I had heard it and that it had told me something true. Not about me. About where we actually were. She didn't ask how I'd heard it. She just went quiet and looked at her hands. The next few months were not easy. I won't pretend they were. There were nights I sat in my son's room after he was asleep just to feel less alone in the house. There were mornings I drove to work on autopilot and sat in the parking garage for 10 minutes before I could make myself go inside. The kids handled it better than I expected and worse than I hoped. My daughter went through a phase where she was angry at everyone, including me. And that was hard because I understood why, but it still landed like a fist. But we got through it. The mediation was straightforward. My attorney said afterward that he'd rarely seen the financial side move as smoothly as ours did. I think my wife, to her credit, understood that I had been fair and that she had forfeited the right to be anything other than fair in return. The custody arrangement gave both of us substantial time with the kids. My son chose to spend slightly more time at my place. My daughter settled into a rhythm that seemed to work for her. The therapist continued to see them both, and I continued to see her as well, separately, because I had come to understand that processing this kind of thing alone was not a strength. It was just stubbornness, wearing a mask. In August, about 3 months after the separation, I got a call from a development company based in Cincinnati. They were looking for a senior project engineer to lead the structural side of a major infrastructure contract they'd secured in Colorado. It was a significant step, more responsibility, better compensation, a chance to work on something genuinely large-scale. The kind of opportunity I probably would have passed on a year earlier because I thought my life was already exactly where it needed to be. I took it, remote-based, with travel to Denver every few weeks. The last Friday in September, I drove to pick up the kids for the weekend. It was one of those Tennessee evenings in early fall where the sky goes gold around 5 o'clock, and everything smells like someone nearby is burning leaves. My son came out first with his backpack slung over one shoulder, and then my daughter, who had recently decided she was too old to run, but who walked fast enough that it amounted to the same thing. She got in the back seat and said, "Dad, can we get pizza?" I said yes. She said, "Real pizza, not frozen." I said, also, yes. My son looked at me from the passenger seat as I pulled out of the driveway and said, "You seem different, Dad. Like, good different." I thought about that for a minute. "Yeah," I said. "I think I might be." We drove through that gold-lit evening toward a pizza place in East Nashville that the kids had been talking about for weeks. And I thought about the word dependable and how for a long time I'd let someone else define what it meant. Dependable had meant invisible to her. It had meant easy to overlook, easy to dismiss, easy to talk about in that particular way on a back porch, while her husband was standing 20 feet away filling a glass of water. But that word belonged to me now. I'd taken it back. Dependable meant I showed up. It meant I did what I said I was going to do. It meant that, when the structure started cracking, I didn't panic. I assessed, I planned, and I rebuilt. It meant my kids knew, down to the bone, that I would be there. That's not boring. That's the only thing that actually holds.